Good morning, everyone. I know we've got to kind of go quick this morning, so I will call this morning's meeting to order for Economic Development Committee today, June 15th. A physical quorum of the members is not present. However, pursuant to 70 of the Open Meetings Act.
A physical quorum.
Is present. Sorry.
Thank you. Member Hart status on the committee.
I like
He
that.
I'll
second that.
Yeah, he is.
Oh,
He
I'm
is.
sorry.
He is. No, we're
Sorry
good.
about that.
So I was just reading the wrong section. So physical quorum
You just
quorum
call
of
me
the members
Bernhard. No, I'm
is
sorry.
physically
Oh,
present.
It's a slip.
And I'll entertain a motion to permit those members who are not physically present due to coronavirus to participate via video conference. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. All right, so we just need to move on to a roll call, please.
Chavez,
Here.
Member Selman, Member Renahan, Member Eckhoff,
Here.
Member DeCiani,
Here.
and Member Rutledge.
All right, so we are going to rush forward to number 8 first, so that if Mr. Member Eckhoff would like to get back to JCS, he can. So we'll go forward to the resolutions. So I'd like to move approval of FIR 032021, acceptance and appropriation of additional funding for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity Trade Adjustment Assistance Grant for the fiscal year 19, Intergovernmental Agreement number 19661-006, Company 5000, Accounting Unit 2840 in the amount of $158,370.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. And then also I'd like to move approval of EDR 32121, a resolution, amendment to the resolution of EDR 0152-21, approval of issuance of payments by DuPage County to training providers through the Trade Adjustment Assistance Grant, fiscal year 19, Intergovernmental Agreement 19661-006 in the amount of $127,902. This is an increase.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that resolution passes.
We do approval of minutes.
Yes, and then we also need to approve the minutes. Thank you.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, wonderful. So I just had a few chairman's remarks, and then Mr. Eckhoff, we appreciate your attendance, and if you need to sneak back, you can. I just want to thank the board for their flexibility with the recent rental agreement we had for WorkNet. I know that that came to the board several times, but I think we're really working through that, and I want to just thank everyone for allowing us to shift gears when needed, and I think that that just shows that we're flexible, and we know that when new circumstances arise and we need to look at things, we'll do that. So thank you for that. I also want to thank DuPage, WorkNet, and also the DCVB. I think Beth is on our call for all their coordination as we start to prepare for these ARPA funds. I know a lot of work has gone in behind the scenes, and they've really had to shift gears as we get more information, and I really appreciate all their hard work. So for now, to that point, I will turn it over to Mr. Greg Betelov so that he can present on our plan for the Reinvest DuPage program, part 2.
Nothing that you're about to say.
No offense, members. Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. We are proposing some changes to the Reinvest DuPage program. You're familiar with the program. We did it. We were happy to administer it on behalf of the county and the county board with the CARES Act dollars. And now we are providing you our recommendations and strategy for ARPA funds for the next phase or the next round, however we want to refer to it, of Reinvest DuPage, which, as the term implies, is a grant program designed to support small businesses in DuPage County that were impacted by COVID-19. Additionally, independent contractors would be included as well. Next slide, please. So we are proposing $30 million over 4 years of ARPA funds in 2 allocations, $15 million in the first allocation, which would happen hopefully at the county's next board meeting on June 22nd, with the second $15 million allocation, which would coincide with the county's receipt of the second allocation of ARPA funds. Obviously, DuPage County, working in conjunction with Choose DuPage, would be the agency that administers the program. And again, the intent is to assist small businesses, not-for-profits, and independent contractors impacted by COVID-19. I do want to make one point on not-for-profits. We had a great conversation yesterday with the folks in finance, audit, etc. On not-for-profits. It would only be for operational expenses for not-for-profits, not program expenses for not-for-profits. In other words, We wouldn't help put on a street fest for a not-for-profit. The funds could not be used as a pass-through for rent support. It would be for things that were associated with COVID under the CARES Act, like rent, payroll, and other operational costs. Restaurants, we are recommending that restaurants would be included in this round. You may be thinking restaurants had a carve-out with ARPA funds. The Restaurant Relief Fund is already oversold in the state of Illinois, and there are still clearly restaurants in need, so we are recommending that restaurants continue to be included. Next slide, please. So the criteria would change a little bit from the previous program. Again, you have to be located in DuPage County. That's obvious. This year, however, we are proposing grants up to $50,000 for businesses that have $20 million or less in annual gross revenue. We're also removing the requirement regarding, or the criteria regarding, number of full-time employees. It seemed like last year, the number of full-time employees versus the revenue, there was really not a true direct correlation. So this time, the number of full-time employees doesn't matter. It's strictly the total revenue for the business being 20 million or less. Naturally, you have to be in good standing. And we, based on a conversation we had yesterday with senior staff, the dot point up there about being in business as of July 1st, 2019, we're waiting to hear back from staff, and we just had the meeting yesterday afternoon, so we couldn't change the slide by today. We're thinking it might make more sense to have been in business as of January 1st, 2019, as opposed to July 1st, 2019. And the reason for that is one of the challenges we're going to have with the program this time around is comparing revenue decline due to COVID for an appropriate period of time. So if a business was in business as of July 1st, let's say they opened October 1st of 2019, and they had 3 months of revenue, what 3 months of revenue do you use during a COVID period to compare that revenue to? Finance, and particularly audit, felt it would be easier for them and better for them from an audit trail perspective. That was one of the things they heard last time, I guess, from Guidehouse, that they would have liked a more robust revenue comparison period. Naturally, you have to be in good standing. And for independent contractors, the criteria is generally the same, except the grants would be $15,000 maximum, $25,000 or less in gross annual income, with more than 50% of that income coming from 1099 work. This is designed to address gig workers and those folks who work in that the new economy.
I got disconnected, I'm sorry. I should get back up in a second.
Disconnected, and I don't have the hard copy of the presentation right in front of me, but I think it's going to go into the timeline and how the process will work. So we would present to finance on June 22nd, or this would be presented to finance on June 22nd, and then go to the county board. We would propose opening the portal, the Choose DuPage portal, for applications on June 28th of this year. We would, prior to then, have a webinar, which we would promote via all of the marketing and the social media work that we've done in the past. We would do a Spanish translation of the webinar, so our Spanish-speaking businesses could have an opportunity to learn about the program as well. We would monitor the intake and the number of businesses that are applying. It's kind of a judgment call on Choose DuPage's part. There's a rejection rate associated with applicants, and knowing what that rejection rate has been historically would factor into when we close the portal, because the last thing we want to do is tell people your grant is being considered and then say we ran out of money. We believe it's better to kind of stop a little short, and then if we have money left over, come back to the county board and ask it like we did last year if the county wants to do another round of funding. If you can go to the next slide now, maybe I covered the majority of it. Revenue decline. Again, this is what I talked about earlier. We talked about a 6-month period. Hopefully by the end of the day today, we'll be, and certainly before the county takes formal resolution on it, to have 1 year to all of 2019 versus all of 2020. And just kind of continuing on that line of thought, as we go further out in the program and the economy recovers, then it's going to become a challenge for Choose DuPage, and we're reserving the right this time to request additional information, because if a business shows a negative quarter in 2020 due to COVID, what business didn't? But in 2021, 2022, 2023 is showing growth over 2019 numbers. Now you're using the money to supplement lost revenue as opposed to helping the business hire people back. So we want to be very cognizant that, you know, we all want to help business and we want to make sure that we're doing this properly, but we also want to be careful that you're not saying, well, yeah, we know you had a first quarter of 2020 or second quarter of 2020 was bad because of COVID, but now you're open and you've recovered. The amount of the grant award cannot exceed the amount of the demonstrated revenue decline. So you can't get, if you had $30,000 in revenue decline for that 1 year period, 30,000 is the maximum grant you can be awarded. Any previous COVID relief funds that you received from DuPage County, state of Illinois, federal government, local municipality, those would all be counted as revenue when we're doing our comparison. We're going to have very strong attestation language that says you're going to use the money the way you indicated you were going to use the money during your application. And I think that covers everything regarding revenue decline. One thing the county staff mentioned yesterday was that the last round we did proof of revenue, we had proof of use of funds. You had to use the funds in accordance with the way you applied. And we did an audit afterwards on the 1,619 businesses that got a grant. We got about 1,100 of them submitting information to their Smart Vault account that showed that they used the money the way they were supposed to use the money. At that point, in conversations with state's attorneys, the state's attorney's office and finance, we stopped. We didn't require any additional use of funds.
Is that a requirement for the first round that they had to go back in and report?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. You had 90 days after you received the check to show us that you used the money, to show the county that you used the money in accordance with your application. It is, I believe, the belief of the state's attorney and the finance department in audit this year that the proof of use of funds will not be required. You are signing an attestation that you're using the funds in accordance with your application. And if it becomes knowledge that you didn't do that, the county reserves all rights for legal remedies to recoup those funds. Next slide, please. Well, I think it's at some point we're going to get into the process, and I think I just explained the process, and I believe that pretty much covers it. We want to get the program up and running as quickly as possible, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and Greg for being here this morning. Of course, I'm Vice Chair of the Fine Arts Committee, and have we talked about some of this ARPA money hopefully helping that endeavor?
Pardon me?
Will any of the
distracted.
ARPA money be applicable to the Fine Art Festival?
Hey, go ahead, Nick. Looks like Nick wants to answer that
I can
question.
tell you that there is a special as part of the ARPA. We have several presentations lined out. DuPage Arts is going to be a special session along with, I think we're combining 2 or 3 other items in there, but they will definitely be in there. This first session is for the business community. Now, if there's arts community businesses, absolutely would be part of it, but there's a special section for the nonprofit arts coming out for ARPA.
As part of this first flush
As
of-
part of the first flush, that will be
Not as part of
coming,
his
not
Reinvest
his.
DuPage presentation.
Got it.
It'll be
Thank
about
you.
2 meetings
Got it.
later.
Thank you.
Just wanted to give you all a heads up. These were ineligibility clauses from the last round. So we don't have a choose DuPage. Obviously, we're your humble administrators of the program. We think we're pretty good at it. We know the system and we know how to get the funds in the hands of the business community quickly, fairly, and accurately. I have received commentary from some folks that excluding members of the DuPage County Board or the chairman who happen to own a small business is not fair and should be reconsidered. I don't have a dog in the fight, to be honest. It's your decision. If you all feel with conjunction and in discussion with the state's attorney that county board members should be eligible, we would certainly process their application just like we processed anybody else's. The Choose DuPage board does not want to be involved in grants in any way, shape, or form. I talked to my board, so that is fine with the members of the Choose DuPage board. And as you know, we have a grant committee that reviews the loans or the grant applications once staff is finished reviewing them, and the members of the grant committee are also fine with that. But I did want to bring it to your attention that I did hear from some folks who thought that not having the opportunity as a county board member to apply is not fair.
Let's have a quick discussion on that because I do think this will come up at some point because obviously we have small business owners on our board. I'll just give my personal standpoint, but I'd love open discussion, is that I think it's a little too close for comfort. I think sometimes when you're elected or you serve on a board, you miss out on opportunities, unfortunately, like this. It's part of the role, but I do know that it has an impact on some of our businesses. So please, let's discuss, because I think, I don't want this to be a sticking point once we get to the boardroom. So go ahead, Member Rutledge.
As a small business owner, I think if we're willing to go through the public record of this, because all of these grantees are going to have to be public knowledge, and that we're comfortable in that, knowing that as a county board member, I would agree that I don't think it's fair that we're excluded. I think that my salary shouldn't exclude me from taking advantages of services that are available to anybody else.
I think if we end up, if somebody should apply, I think they just abstain on the vote. It would be
Yeah.
my suggestion.
Yep. Easy.
So is there a concern, though, that there's so many members that might, I mean, I can think of several in my head where we may get to a point where we're having 7 or 8 members leave the boardroom, and that doesn't necessarily leave enough for a vote. My concern there is like procedural. Nick, can you
That's-
comment?
And I think that if the board wishes to move forward with this, you can absolutely bifurcate votes on different businesses so that members can excuse themselves for a vote for their particular. And so you guys can, we can
And also-
definitely group it together, because all of these come in packages. And so they
we
don't
can
all come at the
isolate
same
them out
time.
Per tranche.
So,
Talk me through that a little bit more, because I don't think I fully understand.
so let's say Choose DuPage recommends 1,000 businesses to get it. We're not gonna get 1,000 coming to board at one time.
You'll get
You might get
100.
100.
Right.
And it could be that if members have a business, maybe, you know,
Two at a
member
time.
DeCiani's company is in that first tranche, and that's the only one. Then maybe he says, I'm not gonna vote in that first tranche. The second one, maybe member Zay has his business in there, then he excuses himself from that vote.
Or
But
they
member
can ask to
DeCiani could vote in
bifurcate.
the second one.
They could ask to approve all but.
Yeah,
as
you could,
well.
you could pull them out and say, I want to approve 99 of them and then vote on that one specifically. And if you do recommend this to be included, it's all about making sure it's visible, everybody knows,
Yeah.
and you say, this company is owned by this member.
For that reason, he will excuse himself, or
Right.
she will excuse themselves. I think there are ways we could work through that.
All right.
If that's the will of the board.
Welcome.
Hi.
I'm at the end of the agenda.
Well, no, and we were just discussing eligibility, just so you're caught up to speed, of the Reinvest DuPage and whether or not we want to exclude eligibility for DuPage County board members or include them in the process. On the last round, they were excluded, and now we're having just kind of an open discussion as to whether or not they should be included. My concern is that Choose DuPage board members have already said that they will exclude themselves. And I think as the administrator of that program, that really says a lot, because they, you know, they're not county board members.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that the Choose DuPage board and the Choose DuPage board member grant, because the grant committee, as you know, is comprised of Choose DuPage board members, is because they are actually reviewing all of the hard documentation. They are making the interpretation of revenue decline. They are making the interpretation of COVID impact and doing a deep dive analysis of the applicant.
Right,
That's why they felt that that was a little too much fox watching the hen house.
So how does this get decided if we decide to make eligibility or ineligibility? That just goes to the finance floor, is that correct, for a vote? Okay.
That the requirements of the Reinvest DuPage can easily be modified on the finance floor and the
Or they could
board
be
floor.
modified before the resolution is
Yeah.
written.
Okay,
I mean, if the general consensus is that we think it's going to be to add it, I would recommend that you maybe give him direction to the contrary now, like go ahead and add it, and then you can pull it off at board if you feel, if it changes. But if the general consensus is add it, that might be something that to go as close to the mark as we can
It's
now.
really only for marketing for us. You know, we want to raise awareness for the program. Clearly, raising awareness amongst 18 county board members is not a challenge,
Okay.
but we do want to get our webpage up and we want to get it ahead of the curve.
The second round of PPP from the feds requires a decline of 3 months from 2020 to 2019. Correct. Would you be a similar,
Yes, sir.
similar look?
Yeah, or if not more robust.
Okay.
Because again, the challenge is going to be, we are now in phase 5, businesses are open, restaurants are getting more crowded. So if you're going to give us 2020 or 2021 sales compared to 2019, it might not paint the picture that you want painted for a grant.
Gotcha.
That's why we're contemplating all of 2019 versus all of 2020. Actually, let me rephrase that. That's why we are recommending that we reserve the right to ask for additional information
Sure.
to make sure that the applicant, for lack of a better term, is not gaming the system by cherry picking dates that show dramatic revenue decline versus a broader picture.
Mhm.
That's kind of my question, because the federal program, it has to be quarters, and you can't make your own quarters, right? They've got to be your fiscal quarters. So how are you anticipating doing?
We're
that?
proposing 1 year. We met with senior staff yesterday from Audit and Finance. We're, I think, going to land on, and I'm waiting to hear back from State's Attorney, Finance and Audit. I think we're going to land on 2019 versus 2020.
Like a full year.
Go full year. And if that picture is revenue decline, then you're eligible. Because to your point, you could pick the second quarter or third quarter of 2019, the fourth quarter, you know, the business is going great, and then the second quarter of 2020, COVID hits, everything gets shut down. That might not be.
I
the
mean,
most
there's no
accurate
perfect way, right? Because we looked at, this didn't happen in a quarterly system, right? This happened in March, right? But still.
What I like about that year though, is I feel like it gives you a broader sense of full decline and a broad sense of loss, you know, or whatever you had, your baseline plus your loss. So I feel like the larger that grouping is versus just a quarter, if you look at a year, I feel like you'll have a better overall sense.
Right, and I think one other point that's important to make is that the funds are intended to be used for things like bringing employees back, paying rent, paying electric, paying operational costs. The funds are not intended, and we're going to market it as such, not to be used to supplement lost revenue.
Right.
Hey, we should have done, and we had that happen last year where somebody said, well, I did $1 million in 2019, and in COVID, I did $1.5 million, but I should have done $2 million, or I would have done $3 million. Well, that unfortunately doesn't meet the criteria of the program. The program is not designed to augment revenue decline for a business, strictly operational expenses.
Go ahead,
There's
Member
another, sorry if this is going to be repetitive. Last time nonprofits were eligible as part of it, is that going to be, continue to be the?
We just talked about it, yes, for operation, yes, for operational expenses only. We talked about that yesterday. I guess Mary Keating's group is looking at a tranche. So if a not-for-profit that provides housing assistance to DuPage County residents applies for the Reinvest DuPage, the funds would be only for, okay, do you have a building and did you need money for rent? Do you need to bring an employee back? But not, here's money that you can pass along to somebody for rental assistance. That would come out of Mary's group.
And what about, we're, you know, clearly we have Chamber of Commerce to reach out and kind of help for businesses, but what are we doing to kind of get the reach out for nonprofits also?
We would work with all of our network to market it as best as we can to the not-for-profit community, Shafali and everybody else, to just Mary Keating, to just get the information out.
Giving DuPage maybe, or-
Giving DuPage, everybody, yeah.
And one last question, your group, Choose DuPage is going to be vetting these, who else? I mean, as our finance chair, I know Bob Larson was on it last time.
The process would be, we would receive the initial applications through the Choose DuPage portal, and that is basically name, rank, and serial number. Are you in DuPage County? Did you have revenue decline? If yes, you move to the next step, which is you receive notification to give us all of the information that we as staff need to do the analysis. Your ST1s, if you're a restaurant, your tax returns, whatever proves that you've had revenue decline. We review those, we get them to the grant committee. The grant committee reviews them. From there, we deliver them by hand, actually, to the county audit department and the county finance department, where they're given an additional tertiary review to make sure they're accurate. And then ultimately, it goes to the finance committee and on to the county board. To answer your question, yes, Chairman Larson, former Chairman Larson, sat as the chair of the finance committee, sat on the grant review committee, and I'm happy to have Chairwoman Chaplin do the same this year. I think it's good policy.
I understand that online we have a member Zay has a question. We couldn't see him.
Yes,
Sorry.
thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, ran late with Member Renahan. Greg, that last slide, I'm concerned about that. I mean, take just an example. Business that's been here for 57 years in DuPage County has grown, expanded, employs people from DuPage County. They've had a loss. They've meet all the criteria except one. They're owned by a county board member. I mean, what's your feeling on it? Is that arbitrary or out of spite? I mean, why do members of the Choose DuPage that are looking at this can't get the grant? I mean, if they meet all the criteria, why are we arbitrarily excluding county board members and their businesses?
And Member Zay, we talked about this a little earlier before you jumped on. I don't disagree with you, to be perfectly blunt. Choose DuPage board members, we discussed this at the Choose DuPage board level, because Choose DuPage board members are actually doing the deep dive into the review of the application, reviewing financial documents and the like. The Choose DuPage board felt very comfortable continuing to be excluded, at least the ones that I spoke to. The Choose DuPage board also believes that you have a very good point, that county board members who are simply voting on a process that has been reviewed independently should absolutely have the right to be considered.
Jim, we just talked about potentially abstaining from a vote on our own business, but we'd still approve of the county board member's business, but we just can't vote on our own personal business. That would be something that we'd probably bring to the table so that, there's I think some political cover there for us, but at the end of the day, I don't think we should have businesses, like you said, that have been around 30, 40, 50 years be excluded just because we're elected, so, and our family members. So my family has 5 or 6 businesses, most of which probably wouldn't even ask, but 1 or 2 might, and they, should they be hurt because, their brother is a county board member, so I would think that, and I just wouldn't vote on a particular business, so.
Well, that's just my concern. If we can take a look at that, I mean, that's, obviously when board members have conflicts, they'll recuse themselves or step out of the room. I don't see why we're not. I mean, if Member Chaplin, owned a business and was reviewing, I could see that because she would be on the committee, but somebody else who fills out the paperwork and files everything and they've had a loss during this period, I think they should be eligible.
So before you came on, I kind of gave my stance on it, that it was a little too close for comfort for me, but I don't think that's the consensus of the room. Julie, I don't know if you have a thought, because I think what we
I'm with you.
Okay, it's,
I mean,
okay,
you know what, I don't think county board members should be eligible.
okay. So if, I feel like we're a little divided in the room, but I did want to give Greg today some direction, one way or the other.
I can tell you, I have looked through the ARPA guidelines as closely as I can, and there doesn't appear to be any language that would preclude what Member DeCiani, Rutledge, and Zay are discussing.
Okay.
And if you're concerned about our internal process, I can assure you that we have controls in place that can pull them out before anybody sees them and before anybody has an opportunity to even know that any county board member or their family or anybody that you're currently discussing. And again, this is your decision, not Choose DuPage's decision. But we have the ability to remove those before they even get to step 1. Just bifurcate the entire process.
For me, it's not about, I mean, I trust your process. I think it's optics. So I just don't like it.
And that's kind of where I'm at too. And I think I said, I did mention that sometimes when you're elected or serving on a board, you miss out on opportunities, unfortunately. So that's kind of how I feel. But I wonder what would make it easiest for you, since we're going to go to finance and probably have a full discussion specifically on this topic. Do you want to kind of have one that's prepared if eligible and one that's not, or just
We don't do 2
separate?
resolutions. We
Okay,
do
so one,
resolution.
okay. So
So
we just,
my suggestion would be to write the resolution as directed today by the committee.
okay,
And then if there is a movement on the floor to add language, allowing county board members or saying county board members and their families may or may not participate, that language is discussed specifically on the floor.
okay,
And if the resolution at that time needs to be amended one way or the other, that would be a vote of the board.
Okay, so it seems like the
So that
majority.
everybody sees the same language.
I agree. So I feel like the majority of this committee is to include, to allow eligibility. So why don't we write it that way? And then if it gets contradicted on the floor,
Members want to amend on the floor to remove that language, that would probably be, I don't have a state's attorney in the room, I'm sorry. It seems to me that it would be easier to remove language than to sit and write
I agree.
language on the floor.
okay, so let's add eligibility because that seems to be the consensus we came up with today. And we can remove it on the floor if that's the consensus there of all 18.
I would maybe make the suggestion too of running it through ethics, running the ethic,
And how would that change our process at
Get an
all?
opinion. Just get an opinion.
Yeah, or something.
I can talk to the state's attorney
I would
about
get
that
opinion
and find
from
out
the
what their
state's attorney.
process would be.
Okay,
Ma-
That might be
Madam
their
Chair.
suggestion as well.
okay. Yes, members A?
Obviously, I didn't do this blindly. I did talk to the state's attorney's office last week. They said this was a issue for the ethics. I did talk to Dan Hanlon, our ethics advisor. He is actually looking into it. So hopefully we'll get something before the county board meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. So why don't we do that as a follow-up, that we'll get that additional information and then I'll pass it on to the members. And I think that should probably go out to all 18 prior to the meeting if possible. So depending on timing. So, okay, wonderful. Well, I think we made it through. We just need to backtrack a little bit on, unless there's any further discussion, I don't mean to cut it off, but is there anything else on Reinvest? Okay, I thought we were finished. So, okay, so we just need to backtrack a little because we did jump ahead. So is there any public comment today?
There is that.
Okay, and then we did have an informational item, incumbent worker training memo. Do we have some information there?
Yes,
Is that-
that's a
Mr.
local,
Bach?
that's a
Okay.
local manufacturer. I don't think I can see you.
Okay.
That's a local manufacturer that made it through COVID without doing any layoffs, but now to kind of ramp back up, they're going to be putting their staff through a number of different training programs to boost their skills and the company's competitiveness. And there's a memo in the packet with more details. It involves AutoCAD, accounting, et cetera.
Thank you. And then number 7, grant proposal notification. So just to alert everyone, grant proposal notification GPN 047-21 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Grant fiscal year 21 for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, U.S. Department of Labor in the amount of $5,636,958. And that is informational only, I believe.
Motion to place in file.
Okay, second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful, that motion passes. All right, I think we worked our way through the whole thing,
Yeah.
right, Ms. Everett?
Yeah.
Okay, we did it a little out of order today, but thank you everyone for your
Actually,
flexibility.
there is old business. and
Oh,
new
old and
business.
new. All right, let's go to old business. Any old, any new?
Question.
Sure.
Disability job for maybe for the fall,
Possibly.
possibly?
Yeah, we've
Okay.
been talking about, Ron Schlegel and I have been talking about it a little bit. And it's something we're considering. We would probably have to hold it here because as you saw the last time
Sure.
we had one, the response was really robust.
Yeah.
Which is great. So yeah, we'll keep you looped in.
Okay.
You know what?
Yeah.
Oh, and if you want to have it here, I'm assuming you want to have it in the auditorium. Is that correct?
Yeah, likely, yeah.
We'll just need to give me that room reservation as quick as you can because the election commission commandeers the auditorium for certain parts of the year.
Yeah, we might not have it aligned with disability employment month for that, due to that reason, because that's a kind of congested time of the year.
But if
But
you need space, let me know. We'll
Okay.
look around campus. I'll work with Nick.
Great.
Okay.
thanks, John.
Lisa was kind enough to spearhead our first and then our second,
Oh,
and we
nice.
worked together, and she's does a great job. So
Oh, that's
it's,
wonderful.
with
Great.
you being new, you'll have tears in your eyes. when you
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Well, I look forward to it. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Sure.
All right, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned until 2 weeks. Or no, actually, we don't have a meeting in July. So.
Well, we have
We
the
may have
special,
special
yeah,
call.
we may have the special
Okay,
call
all right.
July 20th.
I'm sure I'll have some
Thank you.
nonsense to do.